Hey guys, Enigmatic Mr. L here. The Fire Emblem series has a lot of playable characters, hundreds even, and with so many characters, some are bound to leave more of an impression than others. So that got me thinking, who are the most forgettable playable units in each Fire Emblem game? So I'm only counting playable characters, naturally, and I'm going to be excluding DLC characters because that would be too easy of a pick. Many people wouldn't even have access to these characters. And I'm not going to count characters who are memorable elsewhere. Basically, what I mean by that is, like, say, for example, if a game has a remake, in the original game, if a character was forgettable, but then the remake did something to make them more memorable, they're not going to count even go by the original because they're remembered elsewhere. Same thing with something like Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn. Path of Radiance might have some characters that would be forgettable if not for their role in characteristics in Radiant Dawn. So, that way, let's just get on the list, starting with the first Fire Emblem game, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. I think in the Arcanea games, many characters, although they do have like their archetypes they're famous for, like the Cain and Abel archetype, the Jagan archetype, the Navarre archetype, the Ogma archetype, etc. The characters themselves are just really forgettable. Um, they basically just have dialogue when they get recruited and like a death quote and maybe a unique portrait, like especially in Shadow Dragon Blade of Light, the NES portraits all just kind of blend together. So there are a lot of candidates I could choose here, but in the end, I went with Caesar. Um, Caesar and Rad joined like roughly midway through the game, and they're basically just worse Navarre and Ogma. Like, hey, did you get Navarre and Ogma killed? Well, here's their substitute replacement. Generally, for most players, the only thing they're really going to do is like either get you a few gold in the arena when they join or die trying. Could have really chosen Caesar Rad, but I think Rad's a bit more of like a meme character. Caesar is pretty forgettable. Next, they have Gaiden. So, two big characters jump out as potential candidates here are Dean and Sonya. They're you can only get one of these two characters, so only recruited by some people would make them forgettable. But Sonya is unique in the fact she's Jetta's daughter, so she has some interesting lore behind her. Dean is pretty solid like combat unit, and they are kind of memorable, like as bosses. In the end, I went with Noma. He has a little bit of a role, like at the beginning of Celica's route, and just kind of disappears. You have to really go out of your way to get him. He's kind of like a secret character. It's like the last character I think you recruit in Celica's campaign. And even when you get him, he's not just like blowing you away like a Goto, like in the previous game. He's just kind of a filler mage unit. Like, I did use him in my one playthrough of Gaiden, but he's not that great. He was just kind of like, he's filler. Like, magic is always at least somewhat useful in Fire Emblem Gaiden, like especially Celica's route, but he does not leave much of an impression. So for Mystery of the Emblem, I knew I wanted to choose a character who's only available in Book 2, having less opportunity to shine than the characters in the previous games, only appearing in fewer games overall. Definitely wanted to go with one of those characters. I did consider like Arlene or Arlen, but he's kind of memorable for like his duel with Merrick in that one chapter. Then we got like Ubilo and his sister, but they have an appearance like at the very beginning of the game in chapter 1. I went with Warren. He's a hunter who joins in like chapter 2, and he's like moderately useful. Like there's some wyverns in the area, he can help with the boss, but generally, like if you're working with Archer, you already have Gordon from the previous game you have an attachment to, or like Ryan, who's kind of a meme if you want to train that character. They both join like chapter 1. And if you're dead set on using like a hunter, just 2 chapters later, Castor joins. He has like bases equal to or not all around better than Warren, and all of his growths are better except like 10% less skill, and he already has like 2 points more base skill than Warren. So if you're dead set and use a hunter, you would just use him anyway. Warren, I think, is pretty forgettable. Genealogy of the Holy War, I knew I definitely wanted to go with a substitute character. These are the characters you get, like if the characters in the first generation, they either die or they weren't paired off, and they're just all around generally inferior versions of their intended kids. They're not like useless, irredeemable garbage, but they're very bland, forgettable. Like The kids have much discussion, like who's the best parenting fairs, what they pass down, what skills, what like growth rates, what like weapon inheritance, that sort of thing. That creates a big discussion. But the substitutes are just one and done deals. And generally, Genealogy of the Holy War, even for blind players, it has many things that just encourage your units to hook up together, just like passive love growths, that sort of thing. Like I did a substitute only run where I didn't use any of the original child characters. I only used their substitutes, and like the last chapter of Generation 1, I had to intentionally kill off some of the mothers just so I could get the substitutes. The character I did end up going with was Tristan. He's this, I think it's like a free knight, I think it's called in this game. Yeah, so he joins Selph's army at the very beginning, and he has good mobility, being on a horse, and he does have fairly good bases for like his low level and his join time, but that's about where the praise ends. He doesn't have pursuit, which is extremely critical to have in Genealogy of the Holy War, and none of his growth rates besides HP are above 30%. Even when I did the substitute only run, Tristan was one of the characters I just ended up like giving up on. I tried to use every character at least a little bit, but Tristan without pursuit, without like good stats, I just gave up on him. Some of the other characters, like substitutes, they have something unique going for them. Like the dancer substitutes, she gets a charm. The Charlo gets the Berserk staff through an event. Ira's kids substitutes, they're at least good at combat. And we got like Hawk, who's a decent enough mage because he still has mages in this, or sages in this game, have a base magic of 15. He still has pursuit, and his sister Hermione, while she doesn't have pursuit, she at least has flying. Tristan just seems very bland, forgettable. Then Thracia 776, many of the cast I feel is forgettable. Like again, just like with Shadow Dragon, the Blade of Light, they join. They have like some dialogue there. They have a unique death quote, and for many characters, that's about it. So a lot of options you could go with. I went with Conmore. Late into the game, you end up a route split, A or B route. Conmore is part B. And while both routes have their issues, A is generally considered friendlier to new players than B. So you get better unit there. You get an extra warp step there. A lot of players end up going with A. So many players won't even recruit Conmore. And the unique character you get in the A route, Amalda, she can use stab, so that's at least something, and she's a girl as opposed to like this old man. Conmore, just joining late, his combat's just kind of like it's serviceable. He could do his job, but it's not going to blow you away. And many of the characters who join after him are more memorable in their own right. Sias for his like leadership stars, Sed for being in Genealogy of Holy War and still having Forseti. Xavier is memorable, perhaps for all the wrong reasons, but he's still memorable. Yeah, Conmore, I don't see him sticking out much. Binding Blade improved many things, I think. It gave like support conversations, but at the same time, they build so slowly. Many players aren't going to see many of them. Like they might see an A support by like in game or so. So one step in the right direction, but they're still fumbling a bit. A few characters I could go with, maybe like Garrett, just kind of a mediocre, like Berserker, that sort of thing. But I ended up going with Dayan. Again, like Conmore, there's a route split very late to the game. So he and Juno, you can only get one of these characters. And Juno and the A route, Ilya, I think it's easier overall. So now it's relying on like dumb luck. There's less fog of war maps, like that sort of thing. So I think A is generally recommended for first timers, the Ilya route. And even if you go like Sakai route, it's just like Dayan, again, just kind of like a Conmore. He's like fine. He can like fill his role, especially like after he joins chapter 21. There's a lot of wyverns for him to use like the bow on, but Juno also has like ferrying opportunities to like carry units across the mountains, and she at least enables like the triangle attack, so that's at least something. Dayan, yeah, just joins late, optional route, mediocre kind of. Blazing Blade, at least for me personally, I think this is a very easy one to choose. And Carla, She's only available in Hector mode, and for most players, that's going to be locked behind like a second playthrough or onward. And even if you like, say you borrow like a friend's copy or download save file online, um, Carla, she joins super late. By the time she joins, after like preparations, which doesn't have any enemies outside the arena, there's 2 main chapters left. There's a Gaiden chapter, and I guess you split like final map in 2. There's like 3, but she joins super late, and then even then, she's foot locked in a game dominated by movement, and she's locked to sword in a game dominated by 1-2 range, like enemy phase action. Any of you get past these circumstances, she's not like terrible, unusable. She's like serviceable, but that's kind of thing. Sometimes a character who's like complete garbage, like say Marty in like Thracia 776, or like Sophia or Wendy in Binding Blade, that's at least memorable in its own right. Carla, just kind of Joins late, locked behind a second playthrough, not going to blow you away or anything. Pretty forgettable. Sacred Stones cast, I think, is pretty good overall. The characters, they're at least like somewhat memorable. They're usable. They have unique portraits, some interesting characters. Like smaller cast allows you to like add quality over quantity. But I think the most forgettable character in Sacred Stones is Vanessa. She's the last character to join, so she's joining late, and her offense and defense both leave a lot to be desired. Like on hard mode, I've barely played Sacred Stones on normal, but on hard mode, just she'll have trouble surviving against enemies. She has trouble dealing significant damage against most enemies. And yeah, you can grind her in like the Tower of Olney or in skirmishes, which applies, to any character, but also just by this point in the game, probably like set on your team. Vanessa does have a few good things going for her. Like shortly after she joins, there's the chapter with all like the Gorgon eggs. I think it's like right after she joins. She can help with that, just like having high movement and flight. After she joins for like a few chapters, your deployment slots open up a little bit, so you can join her, have her like chip on an enemy, or like ferry across like your units, like say chapter 20. But there's also just the fact she joins as an NPC, and if you're not like playing that map quickly, like warp skipping it, there's a chance you can end up dying. There's a very real chance you can end up dying. So for many players, they're just going to go like die and like move on like without her. Path of Radiance. This is where characters that might not be memorable here or memorable elsewhere comes into play. Because like Soph in Path of Radiance, he's an extremely weak thief. You already have Volk, which, yeah, he does charge like 50 gold per unlock, but gold is plentiful in this game, and Volk actually has the stats to survive enemy combat. Soph does not. So Soph would be forgettable, but his role was greatly expanded upon in Radiant Dawn. And then just like characters like Janaf and Ulki in Path of Radiance, they're like extremely forgettable. They don't do anything, but they're at least decent units in Radiant Dawn. So even if they're not useful here, I'm not going to be counting Path of Radiance. I went with Largo. He does have a lot of unique good things going for him. He joins on a map where all of your mounted units' movement, besides flyers, is heavily restricted, so he can shine there. He has access to axes in a game dominated by 1-2 range. He has a lot of HP, decent offensive stats, and he's the only like berserker in the game. That said, he's the only playable character in Path of Radiance, besides maybe like Devdan, Danved, kind of, sort of, to not return at all in Radiant Dawn due to the Berserker class getting removed. That's kind of notable in and of itself. Just in general, even in Path of Radiance, yeah, you can help out on the map he joins, but right after that, you're going to go back to relying on your mounted units, and them not having to mount hurts. Combat, again, it's fine, but it's not going to blow you away or anything. And every character that joins after him is like much more significant to the overall plot. Like Valencia joins, who's been with you for a while, now is finally playable. Anita and Nasir have both huge implications to the plot of Path of Radiance. One of them joins, and then you get one of the Laguz Royals to face Ashnard. Just Largo, I think many players are going to forget about him. Radiant Dawn has a lot of characters to choose from here. Generally, many characters in the Dawn Brigade, like Nolan or Edward or Leonardo, they're kind of bland, one note, but they're at least in land for a good portion of the game when you have few other options, so it wasn't going to be one of them. I almost consider putting Vika in here, the like bird lagoos, but for the map she's around, she's like moderately useful. Like the swamp map, she's like the only fly there because Jill isn't around for some reason. And then there's Kaizo, who joins like the Grail Mercenaries at some point with like meme level stats, but that's the thing. Just being someone to meme, like I think at least a few people have taken him all the way to the tower just as like a flex. So for Radiant Dawn, I went with Renning. Radiant Dawn has like 5 or 6 characters. They're just kind of like serviceable filler you get late to take into the tower with you if you want. But like of them, Stefan, Volk, Bastion, Skimir, kind of Oliver, it's like they at least get like one map to contribute in part 4 before the option to like tower comes on. Renning, he joins like literally it's like preparations to head into the tower. And he's also joining when like 5 Laguz Royals are with you, like blow you away with amazing stats. Renning stats again, they're just kind of they're serviceable, they're all right. Most characters they're going to take like a meme unit, if they've trained up, or definitely the Goose Royals. Renning, I don't see many people taking him into the tower, which is like the only time he can be used. And it has like heavy competition, so you're going to take in 10 units besides the ones that are force deployed. So yeah, even though he does have some like no plot significance, being Valencia's uncle and all, he's generally not memorable. Shadow Dragon, I did consider some of the characters that appear in the paralog chapters. They only appear if you have a certain number of units killed. So you think that'd be a good contender here, but some of them are memorable in their own right. Like Quartz's map and like the situation that he's in, somewhat memorable. Etzel is a decent enough like magic user. Athena is popular in her own right. And then I realized, oh wait, there's also Norn, who she shares the problem with Frey, and that they're both only available in normal mode. But the difference is Frey automatically joins you in normal mode. He's at least with you for a few chapters before he's like, and you could choose to take him with you if the game if you sacrifice someone else, like say Gordon. Norn only joins both if you play normal mode and if you get like 2 or more units killed, like you didn't recruit Gordon or something like that. And she's an archer, and she's still available in normal mode. The extra skill isn't really going to come into play here. She's not really that useful. You can use her, it's fine, but I just think many players, they're not even going to see her, like, at all. Like, the first playthrough, you probably play normal mode, you probably won't get anyone killed in the prologue, so you won't even see her. And then once you play the game again, maybe one experience, like the Gaiden chapters, intentionally kill off units, you're probably going to be playing on a higher difficulty, unless you're playing like a patch that allows the prologue chapters to play at a higher difficulty, you're not seeing Norn at all. New Mystery of the Emblem added some characters that were originally only available in Fire Emblem BS. So, yeah, of the 4 Arcanea games, they're only playable appearances in this game, so I want to choose one of them. Dice and his daughter Malice, they're kind of memorable for like their designs somewhat. I did consider Frost, who joins late in the game, but he does have C-rank stabs, and that's at least, something. In my New Mystery of the Emblem playthrough, I ended up using him a little bit, just like trade around like Warp and Rescue. So I ended up going with Roberto. Roberto joins with Raiden and like Belf. They're part of Camus' like army that they follow under his command. And of the 3, Roberto is actually the only pre-promote, but his stats are roughly equal to, if not worse, than Belf and Raiden. And plus, those 2 can at least, promote and get like promotional gains. Roberto doesn't get that. Like the other 2 units that join, they're surprisingly competent. You can use them fairly effectively. Roberto, in addition to being forgettable, just as like a character, just as a unit, he's just like completely outclassed. Not like memeable levels of garbage, but generally I don't see anyone like really using Roberto. So Fire Emblem Awakening, the cast is fairly memorable. Even people who don't like Awakening, at least like remember this cast. It's had tons of support and get like say Fire Emblem Heroes, that sort of thing. So even like the most forgettable character here is still probably more forgettable than say that many characters and say Shadow Dragon the Blade of Light. I did consider going with like a child character because those are optional. You can only get them in paralogs. But even though I think the system isn't as like detailed as it is in Genealogy of the Holy War. Figuring out who's the best father, like, and what skills to inherit down, what classes, that sort of thing. That's something of a discussion. Plus, all of the child characters have a lot of like support options and romance options, and that's a fun part for many people who played Awakening, like who they're going to pair their kids with, even if it doesn't have any sort of strategic benefit, like the parent, the child, the Gen 1 characters is just something fun to do. I ended up going with Sari, who you might think is an odd choice because in some ways she is very plot significant. She appears in cutscenes a lot. She's one of those characters that, I've been defeated, but I can't fall here in your army. So she sticks around. But just in general, not having supports in a game like dominated by supports really hurts her like stand out a lot. She can support like the Avatar, maybe like one or two other. And yeah, the same is kind of true for like Naga and Ana, but they're memorable like from other games. Sari just plays a part in the Valm arc, and yeah, that's quite a few chapters, about midway through the game, but the Valm arc in general is just considered like filler. People in general talk Awakening, a lot of them are like, well, I like the first like third of the game, then we get to the Valm arc, things just fall off gameplay-wise and story and characters. Yeah, it's kind of ironic, just like, despite playing a major role in the story, just as a character, lack of support really hurts, and just as a unit, she's fine, I guess. But if you really wanted like a Swordmaster, like Murblon character, you're probably going to be using either Lonku, or you like reclass someone else to Lonku and or reclass someone else to like a Swordmaster. And there's no law against having more than one of that class, but I think many players just like variety. I think Sari is just generally like outclassed. For Fates, I wasn't sure whether to do it from each route or just the game as a whole. But if we're talking about the game as a whole, it's definitely Yukimaro, and definitely the most forgettable playable character in Birthright. Joins extremely late through obscure means. You have to like update all of like the Hoshinen puppets or something. And he's one of those characters that's been dubbed like Koran sexuals. Like he only supports the Avatar. That's it. Kana, if Kana is his son, but that's about it. Yeah, it does kind of appear early on as an enemy in Revelations, but it's dealt with swiftly, pretty much never mentioned again. Slightly more memorable in Conquest as an enemy boss, but even then, fairly forgettable. Conquest would be a lot more difficult to pin one down, because there's not a character just exclusively playable on that route. Yes, Gunther only has supports in Conquest, but he's still technically playable in Revelation. And the end I went with Ignatius. In general, the child characters, they felt a lot more like tacked on as opposed to Awakening. It's just they saw Awakening and say, hey, it worked here, throw in child characters without thinking about how well it worked in this game. And even of the characters, like Benny himself, his father, isn't the most memorable character. He's not one of the royals or like royal siblings or one of the like royal retainers. And just Ignatius himself, he's like the big guy but timid personality, something we've seen a lot. Generally doesn't leave much of an impression. Revelations definitely be Fuka. He at least gets benefit. He supports with Hayoto, but still only playable in one route. Obscure like recruitment methods and very limited supports. I'd say he's the most forgettable character in Revelation route. Next we have the remake Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. So generally speaking, Echoes, Shadows of Valentia is considered a very faithful remake. So it only added like, excluding the DLC, there's like two new characters. One for Almsrat, who has Faye, who is memorable for good and bad reasons. She's memorable good reasons. She's known as a good unit, especially she works well enough as like a Pegasus rider, but she works especially well as a cleric. But she also has like a terrible personality, just being like obsessed with Alm. So people are going to remember Faye. The other new character, Conrad, in Celica's route. Generally just hated for like what he added to the story or what he subtracted from it. So that's at least memorable in its own right. So once again, I'm going with Noma and being a faithful remake. He appears briefly at the beginning of Celica's route, but joins very late in Celica's route. You have to go out of your way. It's kind of like a secret character. And then even when he joins, he's just kind of like filler. Like, yeah, you can make him work, give him like a ring to recover HP, have magic, but generally doesn't stand out that much. Fire Emblem Three Houses might be the most difficult game to talk about forgettable characters because this game sold a lot. It's like the best-selling Fire Emblem game, and even people are just kind of like split on the gameplay. A lot of people end up liking the characters and story. So it's difficult enough to choose one. To make it even harder for myself, I decided to go with one from each route. The Blue Lion's house, Golden Deer house, the Black Eagle's house, and the Church of Saros / Knights of Saros. I'm going to be factoring in both as their in their own routes, but also factoring in like if you're playing a different route, how difficult are they to recruit or issues or whatever there. So starting with the Blue Lions, I went with Ash. Just of the other characters in Blue Lions, they all have like some sort of connection with each other. You got Felix, Sylvain, and Ingrid as a childhood friends, and I guess like Dimitri too. Mercedes and Annette are both best friends. Plus, Mercedes has a connection with the Death Knight. Annette has a connection with Gilbert. Then we got Dimitri and Jadu and their friendship and bond. Ash just has like a one and off deal with like Leonardo very early on, and then he just kind of struggles to stay relevant. And just as a unit, like none of the characters in Fire Emblem Three Houses are like bad, but Ash is definitely like one of the worst ones overall. Just his personal skill, gold is plentiful. You can just like buy keys freely. Doesn't really have to deal meaningful damage. Can make him work, but just outclassed. Plus, there's also the fact that if you're not playing the Blue Lions route, if you're playing Golden Deer or like Silver Snow, he leaves your army for a while during the time skip and comes back. That's somewhat memorable, but also it kind of discourages heavily like investing into him in one of those routes. Next, I have Raphael. Generally, people is like that they like this character all right, but he's not like one's favorites. He's not even like hated like some of the other characters in Golden Deer. Like people like Claude for his scheming. People like Hilda or dislike her for whichever reasons. Lysithia, people love her at very least like as a unit. Marianne, people like relate to her like depression, that sort of thing. Then there's Lorenz and Ignatz, who, yeah, people might not like them, but they're at least memorable for how much they're disliked. Raphael is just like, he's fine, he's whatever. Plus, in order to recruit him in like another house, you need like, if you're not going for like the B support to just have a chance for them to recruit themselves, you need to invest, I think it's like armor, which is like kind of, not many people are going to go out of their way to do that. And just as a unit, again, kind of like Ash, he's fine. He's got the bulk, but he's not really particularly versatile, and just got generally good like survivability, but that's about it. I don't see this being like many people's like favorite. Oh, and also Leonie, people kind of criticize her for like obsession with Gerald, but that's at least something memorable. Then in the Black Eagle's house, I went with Caspar. Just compared to the other characters like Bernadetta, Petra, Edelgard, Dorothea, kind of like waifu material for one reason or another. And then Hubert is known for being creepy. Ferdinand is a big like meme. I'm Ferdinand von Eyre. And then Linhardt is at least like a decent healer. Caspar, he like works as a unit, but definitely towards like the lower end. And there's also the fact if you're playing on a different house, he's one of the very few characters that you his B support is locked on post time skip, so he's difficult to like recruit that way unless you invest into your gauntlet ability. And yeah, Ferdinand has the same issue, but he's just like a like I said, just a big meme. Like I'm Ferdinand Viner, he's memorable in his own right. For the Church of Saros / Knights of Saros, I went with Hanuman. Yeah, he does kind of play a significant role early on. Like he teaches you about Crest, but he only appears as a playable as a enemy in the Blue Lions route if you didn't recruit him, as opposed to many other characters. You have to face them in the Crimson Flower route. And just as a unit, he's fine. He has magic. He can work, but nothing too flashy that will blow you away. Just compared to some of the other members, like Manuela, voiced by Ash Ketchum, Catherine and Shamir being like flashy in their own way, Cyril like being hated. Hanneman just doesn't stand out that much. And so the most recent Fire Emblem game, I have Engage, and I went with Saphir. It was a tough choice between Saphir and Linden. They both joined fairly late. They're not like one of the Royals or the Royal siblings, or like one of the Royal/Royal siblings retainers. But I think I gave the end. I think Saphir's a bit more forgettable because one, Linden, he has like at least a funny like crit build meme you can do with him, and his supports are a bit like they range between like funny, and they can also be somewhat like touching, like him and Hortensia. Saphir, despite like joining, appearing briefly during the Brody arc and not being like missable, like some players might not even like end up recruiting Linden, despite like it being like obvious. Linden appears as an NPC as opposed to like an enemy unit. Just her personality and just her combat in general just tends to be very forgettable. All right, that's my list. Let me know if there are any Fire Emblem characters I, ironically enough, forgot about to mention. As always, thank you so much for watching. This is Enigmatic Mr. L signing out.